Chapter 27 of Beyond the Rocks, a Love Story by Elinor Glyn. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Reading by Amy Deutschler. Morella Winmarleigh had been taking an evening stroll with Lord Wensleydowne. They had come upon the two in the summer house quite by accident, but now they had caught them, they would stick to them, and make their walk as tiresome as possible, they both decided to themselves. After very great emotions such as Hector and Theodora had been experiencing, to have this uncongenial and hateful pair as companions was impossible to bear. Neither Hector or Theodora stirred or made room for them on the seat.
"Isn't this a sweet place, Lord Wensleydowne?" Miss Winmarleigh said. "Why have you never brought me here before? How did you find it, Hector?"
Turning to him in a determined fashion.
"You will have to show us the way back, as we are quite lost."
And she giggled irritatingly. "The first turn to the right at the end of the willows," said Hector, with what politeness he could summon up. "And I am sure you will be able to get to the house quite safely. As you are in such a hurry, don't let us keep you. Mrs. Brown and I are going the other way by the river, when we do start."
"Oh, we are not in a hurry at all," said Lord Wensleydowne. "Do come with us, Mrs. Brown. We are feeling so lonely."
Theodora rose. She could bear no more of this. "Let us go," she said to Hector, and they started leading the way. And for a while they heard the others in mocking titters behind them, but presently, when near the house, they quickened their pace and were again alone and free from their tormentors. They had not spoken at all in this hateful walk, and now he turned to her. "My darling," he said, "life seems over for me." "And for me too, Hector," she said. "And when we come to this dark piece of wood, I want you to kiss me once more and say good-bye forever and go out of my life." There was a passionate sob in her voice. "And oh, bien-aimé, please promise me you will leave tomorrow. Do not make it more impossible to bear than it already is." But he was silent with pain. A mad, reckless revolt at fate flooded all his being. It was past 8 o'clock now, and when they came to the soothing gloom of the dark firs he crushed her in his arms, and a great sob broke from him and rent her heart. my darling, good-bye," he said brokenly. "You have taught me all that life means, all that it can hold of pleasure and pain. Henceforth it is the gray path of shadows, and oh God, take care of you and grant us some peace." But she was sobbing on his breast and could not speak. "And remember," he went on, "I shall never forget you or cease to worship and adore you. Always know you have only to send me a message, a word, and I will come to you and do what you ask to my last drop of blood. I love you, oh God, I love you, and you were made for me, and we could have been happy together and glorified the world." Then he folded her again in his arms and held her so close it seemed the breath must leave her body, and then they walked on silently, and silently entered the house by the western garden door. The evening was a blank to Theodora. She dressed in her satins and laces, and let her maid fasten her wonderful emeralds on throat and breast and hair. She descended to the drawing-room, and walked in to dinner with some strange man, all as one in a dream. She answered as an automaton, and the man thought how beautiful she was, and what a pity for so beautiful a woman to be so stupid and silent and dull. "Almost wanting," was his last comment to himself as the ladies left the dining-room. Then Theodora forced herself to speak, to chatter to a now complacent group of women who gathered round her. Those emeralds and the way the diamonds were set round them proved too strong an attraction for even Lady Harrowfield to keep far away. She was going to have her rubies remounted, and this seemed just the pattern she would like. So the time passed, and the men came into the room, but Hector was not with them. He had found a telegram, it transpired, which had been waiting for him on his return, and it would oblige him to go to Bracondale immediately, so he was motoring up to London that night. He had acted his part to the end, and no one guessed he was leaving the best of his life behind him. When Theodora realized he was gone, she suddenly felt very faint. But she too was not of common clay, and breeding will tell in crises of this sort. So she sat up and talked gaily. The evening passed, and at last she was alone for the night. There are moralists who will assure us the knowledge of having done right brings its own consolation. And in good books, about good women, the heroine expresses a sense of peace and satisfaction after having resigned the forbidden joy of her life. But Theodora was only a human being, so she spent the night in wild, passionate regret. She had done right with no stern sense of the word right written up in front of her, but because she was so true and so sweet that she must keep her word and not betray Josiah. She did not analyze anything. Life was over for her. Whatever came now could only find her numb. By an early train Josiah left for London.
"Take care of yourself, my love,"
he had said as he looked in at her door.
"And write to me this afternoon as to what train you decide to leave by on Thursday."
She promised she would, and he departed thoroughly satisfied with his visit among the great world. The day was spent as the other days, and after lunch Theodora escaped to her room. She must write her letter to Josiah for the afternoon's post. She had discovered the train left at 11 o'clock. It did not take her long, this little note to her husband, and then she sat and stared into space for a while. The terrible reaction had begun. There was no more excitement, only the flatness, the blank of the days to look forward to, and that unspeakable sense of loss and void. And oh, she had let Hector go without one word of her passionate love. She had been too unnerved to answer him when he had said his last good-bye to her in the wood. She seized the pen again which had dropped from her hand. She would write to him. She would tell him her thoughts in a final farewell. It might comfort him, and herself too. So she wrote and wrote on, straight out from her heart. Then she found she had only just time to take the letters to the hall. She closed Hector's with a sigh, and picking up Josiah's already fastened, she ran with them quickly down the stairs. There was an immense pile of correspondence, the accumulation of Whitsuntide. The box that usually received it was quite full, and several letters lay about on the table. She placed her two with the rest, and turned to leave the hall. She could not face all the company on the lawn just yet, and went back to her room, meeting Morella Winmarleigh bringing some of her own to be posted as she passed through the salon. When Miss Winmarleigh reached the table, curiosity seized her. She guessed what had been Theodora's errand. She would like to see her writing, and to whom the letters were addressed. No one was about anywhere. All the correspondence was already there, as in 5 minutes or less the post would go. She had no time to lose, so she picked up the last 2 envelopes which lay on the top of the pile and read the first. To Josiah Brown, Esquire, Claridge's Hotel, Brook Street, London, West. And the other, the Lord Bracondale, Bracondale Chase, Bracondale.
husband and the lover, she said to herself.
And a sudden temptation came over her, swift and strong and not to be resisted. Here would be revenge. Revenge she had always longed for, while her sullen rage had been gathering all these last days. She heard the groom of the chambers approaching to collect the letters. She must decide at once. So she slipped Theodora's 2 missives into her blouse and walked towards the door.
"There is another post which goes at 7, isn't there, Edgarson?" she asked. "And the letters are delivered in London tomorrow morning just the same?"
"Yes, ma'am, they arrive by the 2nd post in London," said the man politely, as she passed on to her room. Arrived there, excitement and triumph burned all over her. Here, without a chance of detection, she could crush her rival and see her thoroughly punished, and who knows, Hector might yet be caught in the rebound. She would not hesitate a second. She rang for her maid.
"Bring me my little kettle and the spirit lamp. I want to sip some boiling water," she said. "I have indigestion, and then you need not wait. I shall read until tea."
She was innocently settled on her sofa with a book when the maid returned. She was a well-bred servant, and silently placed the kettle and glass and left the room noiselessly. Morella sprang to her feet with unusual agility. Her heavy form was slow of movement as a rule. The door once locked, she returned to the sofa and began operations. The kettle soon boiled, and the steam puffed out and achieved its purpose. The thin, hand-made paper of the envelope curled up, and with no difficulty she opened the flap. Hector's letter first, and then Josiah's. All her pent-up concentrated rage was having its outlet, and almost joy was animating her being. Hector's was a long letter, probably very loving, but that did not concern her. It would be most unladylike to read it, she decided, a sort of thing only the housemaids would do. What she intended was to place them in the wrong envelopes, Hector's to Josiah and Josiah's to Hector. It was a mistake anyone might make themselves when they were writing, and Theodora, when it should be discovered, could only blame her own supposed carelessness. Even if the letter was an innocent one, which was not at all likely. Oh dear, no! She knew the world, however little girls were supposed to understand. She had kept her eyes open, thank goodness, and it would certainly not be an epistle a husband would care to read, a great thing of pages and pages like that. But even if it were innocent, it was bound to cause some trouble and annoyance, and the thought of that was honey and balm to her. She slipped them into the covers she had destined for them, and pressed down the damp gum. So all was as it had been to outward appearance, and she felt perfectly happy. Then when she descended to tea she placed them securely in the box under some more of her own for the 7 o'clock post, and went her way rejoicing. End of chapter 27. Chapter 28 of Beyond the Rocks, a love story by Elinor Glyn. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Reading by Amy Deutschler. Next morning, over a rather late breakfast in his sitting room at Claridge's, Josiah's 2nd post came in. All had gone well with his business in the city the day before, and in the afternoon he had run down to Bessington Hall, returning late at night. He was feeling unusually well and self-important, and his thoughts turned to pleasant things, to the delight of having Theodora once more as a wife, of his hope of founding a family, the Browns of Bessington, why not? Had not a boy at the gate called him Squire?
"Good day to you, Squire,"
he had said, and that was pleasant to hear. If only his tiresome cough would keep off in the autumn, he might himself shoot the extensive coverts he had ordered to be stocked on the estate. He had heard there were schools for would-be sportsmen to learn the art of handling a gun, and he would make inquiries. All the prospect was fair. He picked up his letters and turned them over. Nothing of importance. Ah, yes, there was Theodora's. The first letter she had ever written him, and such a long one. What could the girl have to say? Surely not all that about trains. He opened the envelope with a knife which lay by his plate, and this is what he read with whitening face and sinking heart. Beechley, June 5th. Hector, my beloved. Oh, for this last time I must think of you as that. Dearest, we are parted now and may never meet again, and the pain of it all kept me silent yesterday, when my heart was breaking with the anguish and longing to tell you how I loved you, how you were not going away suffering alone. Oh, it is all crept upon us, this great, great love. It was fate, and it was useless to struggle against it. Only we must not let it be the reason of our doing wrong. That would be to degrade it, and love should not live in an atmosphere of degradation. I could not go away with you, could not have you for my lover without breaking a bargain over which I have given my word. Of course, I did not know what love meant when I was married. In France, one does not think of that as connected with a husband. It was just a duty to be got through to help Papa and my sisters. But my part of the bargain was myself, and in return for giving that, I have money and a home, and Papa and Sarah and Clementine are comfortable and happy. And as Josiah has kept his side of it, so I must keep mine, and be faithful to him always in word and deed. Dearest, it is too terrible to think of this material aspect to a bond which now I know should only be one of love and faith and tenderness. But it is a bond, and I have given my word, and no happiness could come to us if I should break it, as Josiah has not broken his. And oh, Hector, you do not know how good he has always been to me, and generous and indulgent. It is not his fault that he is not of our class, and I must do my utmost to make him happy, and atone for this wound which I have unwittingly given him, and which he is and must always remain unconscious of. Oh, if something could have warned me, after that first time we met, that I would love you, had begun to love you, even then there would have been time to draw back, to save us both, perhaps, from suffering. And yet I do not know. We might have missed the greatest and noblest good of all our lives. Dearest, I want you to keep the memory of me as something happy. Each year when the springtime comes and the young fresh green, I want you to look back on our day at Versailles and to say to yourself, life cannot be all sad, because nature gave the earth the returning spring. And some spring must come for us too, if only in our hearts. And now, oh, my beloved, goodbye. I cannot even tell to you the anguish which is wringing my heart. It is all summed up in this. I love you, and we must say forever a farewell. Theodora. P.S. I am sending this to your home. As he read the last words, the paper slipped from Josiah's nerveless hands, and for many minutes he sat as one stricken blind and dumb. Then his poor plebeian figure seemed to crumple up, and with an inarticulate cry of rage and despair he fell forward, with his head upon his outstretched arms across the breakfast table. How long he remained there he never knew. It seemed a whole lifetime later when he began to realize things, to know where he was, to remember.
"Oh, God," he said. "Oh, God."
He picked up the letter and read it all over again, weighing every word. Who was this thief who had stolen his wife? Hector? Hector? Yes, it was Lord Bracondale. He remembered now he had heard him called that at Beechley. He would like to kill him. But was he a thief after all? Or was not he, Josiah, the thief, to have stolen her happiness and her life? Her young life that might have been so fair, though how did he know that at the time? He had never thought of such things. She was what he desired, and he had bought her with gold. No, he was not a thief. He had bought her with gold, and because of that she was going to keep to her bargain and make him a true and faithful wife.
"Oh, God," he said again. "Oh, God."
Presently the business method of his life came back to him and helped him. He must think this matter over carefully and see if there was any way out. It all looked black enough. His future, that but an hour ago had seemed so full of promise. He rang for the waiter and gave orders to have the breakfast things taken away. That accomplished, he requested that he should not be disturbed upon any pretext whatsoever. And then, drawn up to his writing table, he began deliberately to think. Yes, from the beginning Theodora had been good and meek and docile. He remembered 1,000 gentle, unselfish things she had done for him, her patience, her kindness, her unfailing sympathy in all his ills, the consideration and respect with which she treated him. When could this thing have begun? In Paris? Only these short weeks ago? Was love so sudden a passion as that? Then he turned to the letter again and once more read it through. Poor Theodora, poor little girl, he thought. His anger was gone now. Nothing remained but an intolerable pain. And this lord, of her own class, her own class! How that thought hurt. What of him? He was handsome and young, and just the mate for Theodora. And she had said good-bye to him and was going to do her best to make him, Josiah, happy. He gave a wild laugh. Oh, the mockery of it all, the mockery of it all! Well, if she could renounce happiness to keep her word, what could he do for her in return? She must never know of the mistake she had made in putting the letters into the wrong envelopes. That he could save her from. But the man? He would know, for he must have got the note intended for him, Josiah. What must be done about that? He thought, and at last he drew a sheet of paper forward and wrote in his neat, clerk-like hand just a few lines. And these were they.
"My lord, you have received, I presume, a communication addressed to you and intended for me. The enclosed speaks for itself. I send it to you because it is my duty to do so. If I were a young man, though I am not of your class, I would kill you. But I am growing old, and my day is over. All I ask of you is never, under any circumstances, to let my wife know of her mistake about the letters. I do not wish to grieve her, or cause her more suffering than you have already brought upon her. Believe me, yours faithfully, Josiah Brown."
Then he got down the peerage and found the correct form of superscription he must place upon the envelope. He folded the two letters, his own and Theodora's, and slipping them in, sealed the packet with his great seal which was graven with a deep J.B. And lest he should change his mind, he rang the bell for the waiter and had it dispatched to the post at once, to be sent by express. If possible, it must reach Lord Bracondale at the same time as the other letter, Theodora's letter to himself in the wrong envelope. And then poor Josiah subsided into his chair again, and suffered and suffered. He was conscious of nothing else, just intense, overwhelming suffering. When his secretary from his office in the city came in about luncheon time to transact some important business, he was horrified and distressed to see the change in his patron, for Josiah looked crumpled and shriveled and old.
"I caught a chill coming from Bessington last night," he explained, "and I will send for Toplington to give me a draught if you will kindly touch the bell."
Then he tried to concentrate his mind on his affairs and get through the day, but the gray look kept growing and growing, and the secretary decided towards evening to suggest sending for Theodora. Josiah, however, would not hear of this. He was not ill, he said. It was merely a chill. He would be quite restored by a night's rest, and Mrs. Brown would be with him anyway in the morning. Of what use to alarm her unnecessarily? But he had unfortunately mislaid her letter with the exact time of her train, so he had better telegraph to her before 6 o'clock to make sure. He wrote it out himself, just,
"Stupidly mislaid your letter. What time did you say for the carriage to meet your train, Josiah?"
And about 8 o'clock her reply came, and then he went to bed, wondering if he had reached the summit of human suffering or if there would be more to come. End of chapter 28. Chapter 29 of Beyond the Rocks, a love story by Elinor Glyn. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Reading by Amy Deutschler. Late that night, in the old paneled library at Brackendale, Hector walked up and down. He, too, was suffering intensely, his only grain of comfort being that he was alone. His mother was away in the north with Anne, and he had the place to himself. In his hand was Theodora's letter. As Josiah had calculated, knowing cross-country posts, both his and hers had arrived at the same time. Hector paced and paced up and down, his thoughts maddening him. And so 3 people were unhappy now, not he and his beloved one alone. This was the greater calamity. But how he had misjudged Josiah! The common, impossible husband had behaved with a nobility, a justice, and forbearance which he knew his own passionate nature would not have been capable of. It had touched him to the core, and he had written at once in reply, enclosing Theodora's letter about the arrival of the train.
"Dear Sir, I am overcome with your generosity and your justice.
I thank you for your letter and for your magnanimity in forwarding the enclosure it contained.
I understand and appreciate the sentiment you express when you say, had you been younger, you would have killed me. And I, on my side, would have been happy to offer you any satisfaction you might have wished, and am ready to do so now if you desire it. At the same time, I would like you to know, indeed, I have never injured you. My deep and everlasting grief will be that I have brought pain and sorrow into the life of a lady who is very dear to us both. My own life is darkened forever as well, and I am going away out of England for a long time as soon as I can make my arrangements. I will respect your desire never to inform your wife of her mistake, and I will not trouble either of you again. Only by a later post I intend to answer her letter and say farewell. Believe me, yours truly, Brackendale."
This he had dispatched some hours ago, but his last goodbye to Theodora was not yet written. What could he say to her? How could he tell her of all the misery and anguish, all the pain which was racking his being? He, who knew life and most things it could hold, and so could judge of the fact that nothing counted now but herself, and they should meet no more, and it was the end, a blank, absolute end to all joy. Nothing to exist upon but the remembrance of an hour or two's bliss and a few tender kisses. And as Josiah had done, he could only say, "Oh God, oh God." On top of his large escritoire there stood a minute and very perfect copy of the fragment of Psyche which he had so intently admired. He turned to it now as his only consolation. The likeness to Theodora was strong, the exact same form of face and the way her hair grew, the pure line of the cheek, and the angle which the head was set on to the column of her throat, all might have been chiseled from her. How often he had seen her looking down like that. Perhaps the only difference at all was that Theodora's nose was fine, and not so heavy and Greek. Otherwise, he had her there in front of him, his Theodora, his gift of the gods, his Psyche, his soul. And wherever he should wander, if in the wildest Africa or furthest India, in Alaska or Tibet, this little fragment of white marble should bear him company. It calmed him to look at it, the beautiful Greek thing. And he sat down and wrote to his loved one his goodbye. He told her of his sorrow and his love, and how he was going away from England, he did not yet know where, and should be absent many months, and how forever his thoughts from distant lands would bridge the space between them, and surround her with tenderness and worship. And her letter, he said, should never leave him. Her 2 letters, they should be dearer to him than his life. He prayed her to take care of herself, and if at any time she should want him, to send for him from the ends of the earth. Bracondale would always find him sooner or later, and he was hers to order as she willed. And as he had ended his letter before, so he ended this one now. Forever and ever, your devoted lover. After this he sat a long time and gazed out upon the night. It was very dark and cloudy, but in one space above his head 2 stars shone forth for a moment in a clear peep of sky, and they seemed to send him a message of hope. What hope? Was it, as she had said, the thought that there would be a returning spring, even for them? End of chapter 29. Chapter 30 of Beyond the Rocks, a love story by Elinor Glyn. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Reading by Amy Deutschler. And the summer wore away, and the dripping autumn came, and with each week, each day almost, Josiah seemed to shrivel. It was not very noticeable at first, after the 10 days of sharp illness which had prostrated him when he received the fatal letter. He appeared to recover almost from that, and they went down to Bessington Hall at the beginning of July. But there was no further talk of a second honeymoon. Theodora's tenderness and devotion never flagged. If her heart was broken, she could at least keep her word, and try to make her husband happy. And so each one acted a part, with much zeal for the other's welfare. It was anguish to Josiah to see his wife's sweet face grow whiter and thinner. She was so invariably bright and cheerful with him, so considerate of his slightest wish. His pride and affection for her had turned into a sort of adoration as the days wore on. He used to watch her silently from behind a paper, or when she thought he slept. Then the mask of smiles fell from her, and he saw the pathetic droop of her young, fair head and the mournful gloom that would creep into her great blue eyes. and he was the stumbling block to her happiness. She had sent away the man she loved in order to stay and be true to him, to minister to his wants, and do her utmost to render him happy. Oh, what could he do for her in return? What possible thing? He lavished gifts upon her. He lavished gifts upon her sisters, upon her father. Their welfare, he remembered, was part of the bargain. At least she would know these, her dear ones, had gained by it, and so far, her sacrifice had not been in vain. This thought comforted him a little, but the constant gnawing ache at his heart and the withdrawal of all object to live for soon began to tell upon his always feeble constitution. Of what use was anything at all? His house or his lands, his pride in his position, even his title of squire, which he often heard now. All were Dead Sea fruit, dust and ashes. There never would be any Browns of Bessington in the years to come. There never would be anything for him, never any more. For a week in September, Captain and Mrs. Dominic Fitzgerald had paid them a visit, and the brilliant bride had cheered them up for a little and seemed to bring new life with her. She expressed herself as completely satisfied with her purchase in the way of a husband. It was just as she had known. 3 was a lucky number for her, and Dominic was her soul's mate. And they were going to lead the life they both loved, of continual movement and change and gaiety. But the situation at Bessington distressed her. "Why, my dear, they are just like a couple of sick paroquets," she said to her husband. "Mr. Brown don't look long for this world, and Theodora is a shadow. What in the Lord's name has been happening to them?" But Dominic could not enlighten her. Before they left, she determined to ascertain for herself. The last evening, she said to Theodora, who was bidding her good night in her room, "I had a letter from your friend Lord Bracondale last week from Alaska. He asks for news of you. Did you see him after he came from Paris? He was only a short while in England, I understand." "Yes, we saw him once or twice," said Theodora, "and we made the acquaintance of his sister." "He always seemed to be very fond of her. Is she a nice sort of woman?" "Very nice." "I hear the mother is clean crazy with him for going off again and not marrying that heiress they are so set upon. But why should he? He don't want the money." "No," said Theodora. "Was he at Beechley when you were there?" "Yes." "And Miss Winmarleigh, too?" "Yes, she was there." "Oh," said Mrs. Fitzgerald. "A great lump of a woman, isn't she?" "She is rather large." This was hopeless, a conversation of this sort, Jane Fitzgerald decided. It told her nothing. Theodora's face had become so schooled it did not, even to her stepmother's sharp eyes, betray any emotion. "I am glad if the folly is over," she thought to herself. "But I shouldn't wonder if it wasn't something to do with it still, after all. If it is not that, what can it be?" Then she said aloud, "He is going through America, and we shall meet him when we get back in November, most likely. I shall persuade him to come down to Florida with us, if I can. He seems to be aimlessly wandering around, I suppose, shooting things. But Florida is the loveliest place in the world, and I wish you and Josiah would come too, my dear." "That would be beautiful," said Theodora. "But Josiah is not fit for a long journey. We shall go to the Riviera most probably when the weather gets cold." "Have you no message for him then, Theodora, when I see him?" And now there was some sign. Theodora clasped her hands together, and she said in a constrained voice, "Yes, tell him I hope he is well, and I am well, just that." and she walked over to the dressing table and picked up a brush and put it down again nervously. "I shall tell him no such thing," said her stepmother kindly, "because I don't believe it's true. You are not well, dear child, and I am worried about you." But Theodora assured her that she was, and all was as it should be, and nothing further could be got out of her. So they kissed and wished each other good night, and Jane Fitzgerald, left to herself, heaved a great sigh. Next day, after this cheery pair had gone, things seemed to take a deeper gloom. The mention of Hector's name and whereabouts had roused Theodora's dormant sorrows into activity again, and with all her will and determination to hide her anguish, Josiah could perceive an added note of pathos in her voice at times, and less elasticity in her step. Once he would have noticed none of these things, but now each shade of difference in her made its impression upon him. And so the time wore on, their hearts full of an abiding grief. When October set in, Josiah caught a bad cold, which obliged him to keep to his bed for days and days. He did not seem very ill, and assured his wife he would be all right soon. But by November, Sir Baldwin Evans, who was sent for hurriedly from London, broke it gently to Theodora that her husband could not live through the winter. He might not even live for many days. Then she wept bitter tears. Had she been remiss in anything? What could she do for him? Oh, poor Josiah! And Josiah knew that his day was done, as he lay there in his splendid silk-curtained bed. But life had become of such small worth to him that he was almost glad.
"Now soon she can be happy, my little girl," he said to himself, "with the one of her class. It does not do to mix them, and I was a fool to try. But her heart is too kind ever to quite forget poor old Josiah Brown."
And this thought comforted him, and that night he died. Then Theodora wept her heart out as she kissed his cold, thin hand. When they got the telegram in New York at Mrs. Fitzgerald's mansion, Hector was just leaving the house, and Captain Fitzgerald ran after him down the steps.
"My son-in-law, Josiah Brown, is dead," he said. "My wife thought you would be interested to hear. Poor fellow, he was not very old either, only 52.
Hector almost staggered for a moment, and leaned against the gilded balustrade. Then he took off his hat reverently, while he said in his deep, expressive voice,
"There lived no greater gentleman."
And Captain Fitzgerald wondered if he were mad or what he could mean, as he watched him stride away down the street. But when he told his wife, she understood, for she had just learned from Hector the whole story. And perhaps, who knows, far away in Shadowland, Josiah heard those words, "There lived no greater gentleman," and if he did, they fell like balm on his sad soul. End of chapter 30. Chapter 31 of Beyond the Rocks, a love story by Elinor Glyn. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Reading by Amy Deutschler. It was 18 months after this before they met again, Hector and Theodora. And now it was May, and the flowers bloomed, and the birds sang, and all the world was young and fair. Only Morella Winmarleigh was growing into a bitter old maid. At 28, people might have taken her for a matron of 10 years older. She had wondered for weeks what was the result of her action with the letters. She hoped daily to hear some of the catastrophe and scandal falling upon the head of Theodora. But she heard nothing. It was only after Josiah's death that details were wafted to her through the Fitzgeralds. How poor Mr. Brown had never really recovered from a slight stroke he had had on leaving Beechley, and of Theodora's goodness and devotion to him, and of his worship of her. And Morella had the maddening feeling that if she had left well alone this death might never have occurred, and her hated rival might not now be a free and beautiful widow, with no impediment between herself and Hector when they should choose to meet. She had meant to be revenged and punish them, and it seemed she had only cleared their path to happiness. There was really no justice in this world. Theodora had gone to meet her father and stepmother in Paris. Her sisters were married and very happy, she hoped. Prosperity had wonderfully embellished their attractions, and even Sarah had found a mate. And Lady Bracondale remained her placid, stately self. Her grief and disappointment over Hector's departure from England had passed away by now, and so had her treasured dream of receiving Morella Winmarleigh as a daughter. But Anne whispered to her that she need not worry forever, and some day soon her brother might choose a bride whom even she would love. Hector had continued his wanderings over the world for many months after Josiah's death. He felt, should he return to England, nothing could keep him from Theodora. And she, too, had travelled and explored fresh scenes, and was now a supremely beautiful and experienced woman, courted and flattered and besieged by many adorers. But she was still Theodora, with only one love in her heart and one dream in her soul, to meet Hector again and spend the rest of her life in the shelter of his arms. She heard of him often through her stepmother, and sometimes she saw Anne, and both Hector and she understood and knew the time would come when they could be happy. Jane Anastasia Fitzgerald had romantic notions. This pretty pair, whom she looked upon as of her own producing, must meet again under her auspices in like circumstances as they had done on the happy and never-to-be-forgotten day when she herself had promised her heart and hand to Dominic Fitzgerald. "There is something lucky about Versailles," she said, "and they shall experience it too." So she planned a picnic, and arranged it with Hector before he reached Paris. He was not to show himself or communicate with Theodora. He was just to be there at the reservoirs and wait for their arrival. And the gods smiled, and the day was fine, and the trees were green as had been another day 2 years ago. And oh, the wild, mad joy that surged up in their hearts when their eyes met once more! They could not speak, it seemed, even the words of politeness, so they wandered away into the spring woods, silent and glad, and it was not until they reached the shrine of old Enceladus that Hector clasped Theodora again in his arms and gave rein to all the passionate love and delirious happiness which was flooding his being. There one can leave them, together for always, looking out upon the realization of that fair dream of life, safe in each other's arms, in those smooth waters beyond the rocks. End of chapter 31. End of Beyond the Rocks, a love story by Elinor Glyn.